But sometimes, even a mountain of evidence is not enough for leaders to act. Sometimes their politics gets in the way. A classic example is the Western attitude to the Khalistan movement. They've ignored the evidence. They've ignored India's complaints, and they've hosted these separatist elements for years. But now, the strategy is backfiring. Those same elements are making Western societies unsafe. Case in point, California. It is home to a sizable Sikh community, and most of them, I must say, are vibrant and productive members of the society. But recently, there have been problems. It started off with brawls and sword fights in 2018. In the last 9 months, they escalated to guns. 2 separate shootings were reported in Gurudwaras in California, first in August, when 11 people were shot, August 2022. The second was last month, when 2 people were shot in Sacramento. After these incidents, California police launched a major operation. They called it Broken Sword. They raided 20 locations. They arrested 17 men and seized 41 illegal arms. 41 illegal arms. At least 1 machine gun was also found and an AK-47. Reports say 4 of these suspects hold Indian passports. The rest are born and brought up in the United States. California's Attorney General proudly announced that 41 illegal guns are now off the streets. Listen to this.
This operation is a result of that unifying goal, as mentioned by our district attorney. 17 members arrested from 2 criminal syndicates, 41 guns that were on our streets that are no longer on our streets and are out of the hands of dangerous individuals.
The good news is a crackdown is underway. The bad news is it's happening too late. The shooting in August had been linked to Sikhs for Justice. It's a Khalistani organization based in the US. It is banned in India, but it's thriving in the West. In fact, California has seen multiple incidents involving Khalistani elements. In 2018, a Sikh body leader was attacked twice. In 2022, there was a shootout at a Gurudwara in Stockton. Last month, the Indian consulate in San Francisco was attacked. So clearly, this was a growing problem. Yet the police operation was launched only after 2 mass shootings, only when the wider community was being affected. And this sums up the Western attitude to Khalistan. They've allowed separatists and criminals to masquerade as activists, as ordinary members of the community. Take this police operation in California, for example. 2 of the arrested men are wanted here in India, and that too for multiple murders. These are the sort of people living freely in the West. They get donations from ignorant businessmen. They get official support from unassuming lawmakers. And suddenly, a movement with virtually no support in India begins to thrive abroad. So this crackdown by California should be a template for other countries. Do not ignore the Khalistani problem, because today they're focused on troubling India, but tomorrow you could also be the victim. And this applies to all countries harboring elements like the Khalistan movement. Because remember, there is no such thing as a good separatist. Xi Jinping has been called many things: Red Emperor, authoritarian, communist dictator, Winnie the Pooh. The list goes on, but none of those names befit a statesman. So what does Xi do? He tries to rebrand himself as the wise and benevolent peacemaker, the elder statesman, fighting for world peace. It's been a gradual process. Until last year, we were talking about China's wolf warrior diplomacy. Now you have peace plans coming out every month. February, there was a peace proposal for Ukraine, ambitious and hence rejected. In March, there was a peace deal for Saudi Arabia and Iran, and this time she had luck. Many called it China's arrival in West Asia. So naturally, it's time for the April peace plan. But this time, Xi Jinping is eyeing the improbable. He wants to broker peace between Israel and Palestine. Quick background here. On Monday, Xi's foreign minister dialed his counterparts in Israel and Palestine. His message to both leaders was largely the same. The recent violence is concerning, restraint is the need of the hour, and both sides must work towards a 2-state solution. The Chinese statement actually makes for interesting reading. Beijing says it has, quote-unquote, no selfish interest in the region, which is true, If you exclude the $19 billion China has invested in Israel, there is no selfish interest. But we'll get to that later. First, let me tell you how the Israeli foreign minister responded. He said Israel is committed to cooling the situation. He also said that a resolution will take time and will not be reached in a short term. So a lukewarm response at best. Now, what exactly explains China's sudden confidence, though? After all, this is not a new conflict. For decades, the US has tried to strike peace between Israel and Palestine. If the Americans failed and the United Nations failed, can she succeed? Most of China's influence in West Asia is linked to one thing, and that is money. Like I said, China has pumped in $19 billion into Israeli companies. They also operate 3 out of Israel's 4 major ports. Bilateral trade, nearly $22 billion. In fact, China is one of the biggest sources of Israeli imports. That sort of money does give leverage. Plus, China comes with some important goodwill. They have excellent ties with Israel's biggest rivals, Saudi Arabia and Iran. But having said all of this, money is not the biggest factor for Israel. Security is. This is a country whose existence is denied by most neighbors. It needs robust military assistance for security. Enter the United States. Israel is the largest recipient of US military aid, some $150 billion every year, $150 billion per year. You may have heard about Israel's magical Iron Dome defense system. And that is actually replenished by the US. So there will be pressure on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to reject Chinese mediation. And it won't be a first. We've seen examples of this in the past. In 2020, Israel rejected a Chinese bid to build a desalination plant. Why? Because pressure from Washington. Same year, they cancelled a radar deal with China. Last year, in 2022, China lost a light rail project in Tel Aviv. So the bottom line is this: China's relations with Israel have certainly grown over the years, whether it's trade, investments, or tech transfers. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu himself presided over this growing relationship. In fact, they're now negotiating a free trade agreement. But there is one thing Xi Jinping cannot guarantee, and that is an endless war chest. As for Palestine, their options are limited. The world is dangerously close to forgetting their movement, so the attention from China will certainly be welcome. But will it be fruitful? At the moment, it looks highly unlikely. With Iran and Saudi Arabia, the chips aligned perfectly for Beijing, plus the resolution was between equals. But that's not the case in Ukraine, and that's not the case in Israel. Both Russia and Israel are powerful countries with powerful armies. So getting them to concede is not easy. As for the United States, it's time to introspect for them. Their foothold in West Asia is now firmly linked to defense only. There is little goodwill, little financial dependence, and of course, the oil factor is gone. This military dynamic applies to all US allies in West Asia, including Saudi Arabia. More than 60% of their weapons come from America, less than 1% from China. Unless Beijing can bridge that gap, such peace plans will have few takers. Now let's talk about what's going on in the US. As usual, racism and gun terror are in the headlines. This is a story coming out of Kansas City in the state of Missouri. The latest sordid tale features a boy, a 16-year-old black boy. His name is Ralph Yarl, and he was shot in the head. Do you know what his crime was? He rang the wrong doorbell, that's all. He was shot in the head because he rang the wrong doorbell. He was going to pick up his siblings. He accidentally went to the wrong house. Inside was an 84-year-old white man who decided to shoot first and ask questions later. And it gets worse. After the teenager went down, the homeowner shot him again, just to be sure, apparently. And there isn't any real defense of this old man's actions. The gun was fired from behind his door. The teenager had not entered the residence. This has resulted in widespread public anger, as it should. Celebrities have spoken out. Even Vice President Kamala Harris has condemned the incident. And here's what the police said when it happened.
On April 13th, just before 10 o'clock p.m., officers were called to a residence where a teen was shot in front of the residence by a homeowner. The teen was transported to a local hospital for his injuries. The homeowner was taken into custody and placed on a 24-hour investigative hold.
Now, there are a couple of things to unpack here. First, the old attacker was released. Reports say he was released after just 2 hours in custody. He got to sleep in his own bed after shooting a child in the head. Do you know of lots of cases where an attacker shot a child in the head and was allowed to return home? US media outlets have raised this question. Here's what they're asking. What would have happened if a black man had shot a white teenager in the head? Would he be allowed to go home? Chances are he wouldn't. This whole incident reeks of racism, from the shooting itself to how the police handled the aftermath. The other thing that this incident took place last Thursday, and only yesterday, after a gap of 4 days, did the authorities press charges. The victim's family and friends were obviously furious, as were the people protesting against the incident. After the delay, this is what a state prosecutor said.
The defendant, Andrew D. Lester, is charged with the Class A felony of assault in the first degree in that on or about April 13th, 2023, in Clay County, Missouri, he knowingly caused physical injury to P.Y. by shooting him. This is an A felony. It carries with it a range of punishment of up to life. In count 2, the defendant is charged with armed criminal action.
Again, a lot to unpack. The attacker is accused of, quote-unquote, knowingly causing physical injury. The other charge is armed criminal action. Well, what about attempted murder? He is not charged with attempted murder, and the prosecutor defended this. He says the charges levied carried the highest possible prison time for the shooter.
Was there a racial component to this case, however?
As the prosecutor of Clay County, I can tell you there was a racial component to the case.
So the prosecutor agrees that race definitely played a part here. The attacker's statement to the police also speaks of an irrational fear. He said, and I'm quoting, he was scared to death by the size of the boy, and that at the age of 84, he would not have been able to defend himself. So essentially what he's saying is this: he shot the boy in the head because the boy looked large. Is that even a defense? Unfortunately it is, and it may work. That's because of something called stand your ground laws. These laws grant people the permission to use deadly force if they feel seriously in danger. That's all they have to do, feel that they're in danger, and they can justify shooting. This is a bizarre loophole. Shooters use it all the time. They claim defense, they claim self-defense, even in absurd cases like this one. And do you know how many American states have such laws? 38. 38 American states allow people to shoot at other people because they feel they're in danger. And Missouri is part of that list. Now, we don't know how this will play out in the courts, but here's another case that lays bare all that is wrong with America: rampant racism and trigger-happy citizens protected by the law. On the upside, the child has survived, he's recovering, he's been discharged from hospital and is receiving care at home. And we do hope that he fully recovers and gets justice. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. Starting with China, an acrobat died after falling from a significant height during a flying trapeze performance. The woman's acrobatic partner, who was also her husband, was supposed to catch her during the stunt. She performed without safety belts for the sake of looking good, apparently. Meanwhile, in the US state of Mississippi, a drone footage has revealed the extent of damage left behind by a tornado. In Ecuador, a new coral reef has been discovered in the Galapagos Islands. It has more than 50% living coral. And finally, what makes April the 18th significant? Taking you back in history, on this day, Afghanistan's former king Mohammad Zahir Shah returned to Kabul. The year was 2002. The Taliban regime had collapsed and Afghanistan needed a leader to restore stability. Zahir Shah had been in exile for 29 years. He had to flee to Italy after he was ousted in a coup in the year 1973. His return was largely symbolic, but he declined to run for president. Eventually, Hamid Karzai was picked to head the transitional government. Zahir Shah was given the title of Father of the Nation. We're leaving you with this. Thanks for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. US and Russia are dangerously close to an armed conflict. This year, 2023, New Delhi will be the capital of global diplomacy. For a country as diverse as ours, with 88% of the population illiterate, it was a very big deal to write a constitution, and that too, the world's largest. Meanwhile, if we may, here's a Republic Day gift from India for the BBC. A list of suggestions for the BBC for their upcoming documentaries. Number 1, the Kohinoor and the colonial loot. Number 2, an outdated monarchy and unhealthy obsession with the royals. Number 3, racism in 2023. We're waiting.